I asked you guys for your favorite thing about High School DxD, and I got a whole bunch of responses, so thank you for that. But basically, I'm just gonna go through, read off what you think is the best thing about High School DxD, and then we'll talk about it. You guys are basically doing my job for me. I think I'll start with a pretty light one, to get everybody warmed up. And this is actually the most commented thing I got, but Aiden Simpson, Martin Collier, Rodrigo Andorina, Media Gonrayas, Fanboy43, and Mr. Waifu Taker. All of those people basically said the fan service. That was all of their favorite thing. And I mean, it's hard to argue against that. I think most people who start watching High School DxD watched it for the fan service. So of course, there's nothing wrong with liking High School DxD for its fan service too. Would I say it's the best part of High School DxD? Probably not. I think it executes its fan service well, mainly because it actually serves a purpose. But I can still see the fan service being the highlight of the story for someone. Now that we've got that one out the way, we can get into the real nitty gritty. The ones that I can actually go into depth on. The next one is from Eric710, and they said that the idea of the chess piece system is incredible to me. And I think this is one of the more underrated aspects of High School DxD. It's really interesting, and for the most part, it is executed pretty well. Especially earlier in the series, I feel like there's more of an emphasis on it. But just the idea of each character being a chess piece, and it all being a part of a big game, I love it. The promotions, being able to promote once you're in enemy territory, I mean, even castling, even that was introduced in the universe. And I think the best part about the chess piece system is that all the characters feel like the piece that they were assigned to. Aside for Zenobia in the main group, everyone else fits perfectly with the piece that they were given. So I definitely agree that the chess piece system is one of the best things about High School DxD. The next one is another one that was submitted by a lot of people. I think this was the second most submitted one, and it's coming from Mr. Westcott, Spiral God King, and Acnologia. Basically, all of them said that their favorite thing was their interweaving mythologies. How the series is able to take all different mythologies from all across the world and put it into one story. And this is definitely on the top of my list as one of my favorite things about High School DxD. Seeing characters like Odin and Loki from Norse mythology being in the same world as Michael from the Bible, I think is pretty cool. And it makes for such an interesting story because I feel like you can stretch this basically forever. But the way that they're able to incorporate these different characters, like even Soso, I was very impressed with how they did Soso in Volume 9. The way that they're able to take things about his original character and put it into High School DxD while still making the character feel original was one of the highlights of Volume 9. It was actually so good that I ended up buying Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and I'm reading it right now. But even just the character interactions, like Acnologia pointed out, the bickering between Odin and Azazel is just a highlight of the series overall. I really do think this is one of the best aspects of High School DxD, and honestly, if it's going to be like Volume 9 every single time, I could read this forever. The next one is from Susky, and they said, is it weird that I like the fanfiction spawned from it? Sure, most of it is hot garbage, but every now and then I find a slightly good one and I feel a little bit more complete. At this point, you all should know that I'm not a big fan of fanfiction in general, mainly because I don't feel like most people know how to write a story. But of course, that doesn't mean that there aren't good fanfictions out there. I don't think it's a crazy thing to like fanfictions, especially one about High School DxD. With how big the world is, I could see why you like these fanfictions. It's just not my cup of tea, and it's definitely not my favorite thing about High School DxD. It actually is pretty low on my list. But I guess that's why I'm doing the subscriber fanfic video, which I'll post an update about sometime soon. But the fanfics being one of the best parts of High School DxD, I don't know, I have to probably disagree with that one. But again, this is coming from a fanfiction hater. The next one is another one submitted by multiple people. It's from Yeoman and Microspec Gamer. They both say that their favorite things about High School DxD is the fact that the fan service actually plays a role in the story and isn't just there for fun. And of course, I agree with this one. I kind of touched on it earlier, but High School DxD's ability to make fan service feel important is honestly impressive. It's kind of impossible to imagine the series without fan service. It would be a completely different story. They did a really good job at interweaving it inside the story to where it doesn't always feel forced and to where it feels necessary. And because they do that, they're able to hold off on the fan service. They don't have to solely rely on fan service to tell their story. You have moments like Issei vs. Cyro Org without fan service that are supposed to be taken seriously. And that really only works because they are interweaving the story with the fan service and not just relying on one or the other. Yeoman also said that it gives a clearer mark between the relationships of Issei and the other characters. And I would say that it's more because they are able to focus on the story. That's why it's easier to follow the relationship between Issei and Rias. Again, because they're blending in blending the fan service with the story, we're also still getting emotional moments between the two where they actually talk to each other. So yes, I do think the blend between fan service and story is one of the best things High School DxD does. The next one was also submitted by a bunch of people, but Vast Gods, Emerald Phoenix, and Death Incarna all said that the fights was their favorite thing about High School DxD. I think the fights are okay. They're good harem anime fight. I think the emotion that comes with the fights is what makes pretty much all the fights good. The best part in nearly all the fights in High School DxD are the emotional parts. But when we're just talking about straight hands and how the fights are directed, I don't think it really stands out enough for me to call it one of the best things High School DxD does. But the emotional value that comes with the fights is pretty top tier. So I can still see where this is coming from. The next one is from Legendary Knight Dante, and it says, "My glorious king Issei, my most beloved fictional character." I do think Issei is a highlight of the series. We actually see him grow as a character, and we see him go through things that make him more relatable and more realistic. He's not a perfect character, he has character flaws, but he's able to overcome some of these flaws. And his journey as a character is very enjoyable to watch. And if you just compare his season 1 self, this guy who was really only driven by perversion and didn't really have anything to fight for, just comparing that version of Issei to the end of the anime, where he learns to fight for not just his friends but also himself. He learns how to be loving and caring. He actually has people that he cares for. He's not just driven by perversion anymore. He completely changes. So I do think Issei is a highlight of the story. The next one is from OK, and it says, "It's an edgy anime that actually tells a well-written story." And I feel like this is something that we can all agree with. High School DxD does tell a surprisingly good story. I've already talked about Issei. I've talked about his trauma before. I've talked about his relationship with Rias before. All of these things are built up over time throughout the story, and none of these things ever feel random. Even looking outside of those things, the story is still really well done. It's filled with emotional moments, an interesting world, good side characters, great relationships between characters, and it all just flows together. It's able to do all of these things, and of course it does have its flaws, but for the most part it's still very solid. The next one is from Azusa MC, and it says, "The character, story, and comedy all work so well together." And of course I agree. This is another thing that they're able to intertwine with the story, is the comedy. The comedy in High School DxD is pretty top tier. Of course I've already made videos about the dub, but High School DxD by itself, there are moments that are funny, both dubbed and subbed. And of course it is able to balance that with the story because it can switch to serious mode too. You have moments where characters are crying, you have moments where characters are going through something, but then you also have moments where characters are just being goofy and silly. It kind of just adds to the entertainment value when you're able to balance those two, and you're able to make us care about your story while also still being funny. I think the comedy as a whole is just a highlight for High School DxD. The next one is from Silver Strike, and it says how relatable the main character is. And I kind of already talked about this one, but yes, Issei is extremely relatable as a character. I know some people relate to his perversion, but I don't know about all of that. I think what makes Issei relatable is, again, the struggles that he goes through, the fact that he's not a perfect character. But Issei also deals with issues with his confidence, issues with his insecurities. And of course, these are issues that people go through too. As a person, Issei is very relatable. He wants to be a good person, he really does. He tries his hardest to be a good person, but it's his flaws as a character and his confidence issues that are preventing him from being the best version of himself. And I think that's the most relatable part about Issei's character. The next one is from The Runaway, and it says, "The fact that in the genre it's in, it still has amazing emotional scenes and makes you connect with the characters." And these are two big ones that are on the top of my list of favorite things about High School DxD. Emotional scenes, I think, are the most impressive thing that they're able to pull off, considering it is a comedy, ecchi anime about grabbing boobs to power up. I think being able to have emotional scenes like Issei's talk with Akuno, like Kiba saying his vows to Rias, their ability to pull scenes like that off is what I would say is the most impressive thing about High School DxD. Like, we go through an entire arc watching Issei fail time and time again, and because of that, the scene of him failing to save Asya is able to hit hard. It really feels like we're watching this character hit hit rock bottom. The emotional scenes are what is able to make you connect with the characters in the first place. I think Akano is the best example of this. Every time I rewatch High School DxD, I always forget how much I do not like Akano in the very first season because I just cannot connect with her emotionally. But seasons 2 and 3, Akano suddenly becomes my favorite character. Suddenly she becomes one of the best written characters because they're able to give her a story that we can follow. They're able to give her emotional moments, a sad backstory, a traumatic life. This is absolutely one of the best things High School DxD does. So big agree there. The next one was submitted by two people. Serial 2 and Wampa Stompa both said that the world building was their favorite thing. The world building is one of the things that I hear talked about a lot when it comes to High School DxD's good aspects. And I think for good reason. High School DxD, we've already talked about it, has a really interesting world and a lot of good lore in it. So the concept is already there, but to be honest, I think they could be doing a lot better with the world building. 10 volumes into High School DxD and we still don't know anything about angels. We barely know anything about fallen angels. When it comes to the world of the devils, I think that's built really well. The dimension in Kyoto, that was built really well. And really everything about volume 9 was just done well. And that's kind of exactly why I think they need to go harder on the world building, because once they do, you're looking at some of the most interesting stories that they tell. I could be invested in the hero faction because of how they built them up. So I do think the world building is good, and I do think it is a highlight of the series, but I think it could be better, and I think it should be better. The next one is from Braylon Williams, and it says, I'm gonna be straight up honest, it's the fan service, the characters, and the story. And of course, I do think these are all highlights of High School DxD. The fan service is something that I think most people enjoy. Most people watching High School DxD are watching for the fan service, so they have a good understanding of what the fans want to see. The characters are of course a highlight. They're able to make you care about characters like Kiba and Konako by giving them entire arcs where they're the primary focus. They don't just focus on one singular character, they go to every single character. Everyone gets their time to shine. And the story, I kind of already talked about the story, but one of my favorite aspects of the story that I haven't mentioned yet is its ability to shock me, because there are moments that are actually pretty surprising. I think the big one is obviously them losing the rating game against Riser, or Asuya basically dying again in season 3. Like, there are actual genuine shocks in the story that keep you on the edge of your seat and keep it from becoming too repetitive. So yes, all these things are highlights. The next one is from Cloudy Kai, who you should subscribe to because he makes banger videos about High School DxD and other series. And it says, Issei as a character, the world building, Zenovia, and the love story between Issei and Rias. And I think these are all really good. I've already touched on Issei as a character. I've talked about his relatability and how his imperfections make him a good character. I feel like despite the fact that Issei's a devil, him being able to maintain his humanity is a part of what makes him so relatable. He didn't become a devil and instantly start wanting to kill people, and he didn't start chasing his darkest desires. Instead, he became a devil and he used his power to help his friends, to build relationships with important people. Like, he's just a good dude. I already talked about the world building and how it is pretty good, but I think it could be better. I do like how Azazel's at the center of all of the world building. Like, everything flows through him. I think that's pretty interesting. He just knows everything. Zenovia is an interesting one because I do think Zenovia is one of the better characters. I mean, she basically had to do a complete 180 with her lifestyle. So seeing her adjusting and adapting to the life of a normal person slash devil, it really is interesting. And it really makes sense why she's so weird and why she feels so out of touch. She's one of the more realistic feeling characters because of that. I also think Zenovia has the most likable personality too. She's goofy, she's funny, but she can also fight. Every fight Zenovia is a part of is a banger. She's absolutely a highlight of the series. And the love story between Issei and Rias, that is one of the things I think they do best. I like how it isn't just as simple as Rias just liking Issei. Issei actually had to earn her love and respect. But also I like how their relationship isn't perfect. Kind of similar to Issei's character, their relationship takes steps back. It's not just a straightforward story where both characters are perfect for each other. They're both dealing with their own problems, and these problems come together and they create a big conflict that actually makes sense. So their relationship is definitely a highlight for me, and it's one of those things you can tell they cared a lot about considering how much time was spent on the relationship between those two. The next one is from Caleb Flores, and it says the character development between Issei and Kiba plus more. And this is also a big one. I'm gonna talk mostly about Issei and Kiba because these two might be the best duo in High School DxD. It's a lot better in the light novel, but Issei and Kiba are basically best friends. They do everything everything together, they trained together, they strategized together, and it got to a point where Issei and Kiba became the two strongest characters in the group. And again, this was built up over time. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. It started with Issei being a little jealous of Kiba and seeing him more as a rival, but then he helps Kiba with his problems through the Holy Swords, and their relationship just becomes so close after that. Issei and Kiba have a good reason for being friends. And honestly, if the characters didn't get naked, I would have said that Kiba should have been in that scene where the characters all confront Issei about his Rainier trauma. I feel like Kiba would have fit really well in that scene. Either way, it works though. But I do think besides for Issei and Rias, Issei and Kiba have my second favorite relationship. The next one is from my boy Dark, who you should totally subscribe to. He has some really premium reactions, and he's just really interactive with his community. So big shout out to Dark, but he has a few of them. One of them is the world building, which I already talked about. I love the world of High School DxD. I love how much it has in it. I love it so much that I want to learn more about it. He also says the characters are complex for an ecchi anime, which of course I agree with. If you look at any main character from High School DxD, they have a reason for being the way they are. All of them go through something, all of them have some type of traumatic experience, or all of them lived a life that shaped the person that they are today. For example, Asya was constantly being abandoned as a child, abandoned by her parents, abandoned by the church, so she grew attachment issues, so she's very clingy with Issei. Akano hates her fallen angel side, so she puts on this mask of a character. She tries to hide her true self. I think it really is impressive how they were able to balance each of these character stories and make you care about each of them individually, because these characters all do have something to differentiate them from each other, and they are decently complex characters. And the next one is, I love how morally gray the series is. Nobody is truly cut and dry a definite hero. Every character, every side character, or every faction has their own demons and have done some questionable things. I like that, as it's more realistic than an always want to do the right thing, always thinks of others protagonist slash main character. And this is an interesting one that I actually haven't heard before, and I do agree with that. This is something that I picked up while I was reading Volume 9, but a big thing about Volume 9, or the first half of Season 4, is what makes you a hero. Because on one hand, you have the hero faction who, in theory, are the villains, but to them, they're just protecting their species. They're doing what they see fit. The devils are the enemies. Issei and his friends are a threat to humanity as a species. It was such an interesting way to present this group, and I love it because it even made Issei question whether or not he was a hero. But yes, I love the morally gray aspects of High School DxD. I do like that not all factions fully follow what you would think they would. Not all devils are evil. Sir Zex is a prime example of it, but obviously you have devils like Diodora who are evil. So that aspect definitely makes the series more interesting, and I think it also makes the story more flexible, because it isn't just a devils versus angels story or a good guy versus bad guy story. They're able to mix and match the battles, and it works really well with this very mythological world that they've already built. So yes, I do like that one since I haven't heard it before, and that's a good aspect. And then he said, in general, High School DxD is a much more complex series than a guy who wants to have a ton of babies. It deserves more credit. And yeah, I agree with that. Of course, that's what the whole point of this video is allowing you guys to give the series the credit it deserves. The next one is from RCE Kingston, and it says the legitimate and well-built character relationships. They feel very real, especially between characters like Issei and Kiba. Helps the main cast actually feel like real friends. And I think this is probably my favorite aspect of High School DxD is the character relationships, especially the ones between Issei. I think those are the best built. All of their relationships with Issei make sense. I've talked about them before in a previous hot take video, but Issei has individually helped all of them. We've seen dedicated arcs to Issei going around helping a certain friend, so his relationship with said friend makes sense and it does feel real. He does little things like asking Michael to allow Zenobia to pray, taking Asya in, helping Akano through her problems with her dad. These things that he does for all these characters not only help his character because now we get to see how good of a person he is, but it really helps that relationship feel more real. But even something like Issei and Volley is built really well. Their rivalry is so interesting. Seeing Issei compare all these people he's fighting against to Volley because he's so determined to beat him makes you more excited for their eventual fight. These two want to see each other get stronger. They want to fight each other at their best, and we see them interact a lot. Volley isn't just some generic evil supervillain that Issei has to beat. He's a rival that Issei wants to beat. So yes, the character relationships between characters, I would say, is the best thing High School DxD does. The next one is from Roxy Toxy, and it says the possibilities that Issei can go beyond the story is one of my favorite things about it. And I do think this is a pretty interesting thing about High School DxD. I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I love it when Issei shows that he can do whatever he wants with his sacred gear. For example, when he curved that blast to attack Soso, or when he was able to fuse Ascalon with his gauntlet. Like, those things just make the future of the series a lot more interesting, and it opens up a lot of potential for Issei's power and where it can go from here on out, and it makes the future fights a lot more exciting too. The next one is from Doomy X3, and their favorite thing was the holy swords, like Durandal. It looks clean, and I really didn't like Zenobia, but she grew on me a lot throughout the show. The holy swords are pretty interesting. Again, I wouldn't say they're my favorite thing, and I wouldn't say this is the best thing High School DxD does, but I do like the concept of like the devil's kryptonite being holy swords and holy items in general. I think it creates a lot more exciting fights, and the stakes are heightened because you know that if a devil gets touched by that, it's over. Durandal specifically is probably my favorite holy sword. I think it might just be because of Zenobia, but it looks cool and it suits her perfectly. I also agree that Zenobia is a good character that grows on you. I didn't like Zenobia at first either when she was all aggressive with Asya, but again, I think that moment just shows you how out of touch she was because of the way she grew up. She just blindly follows the church's teachings, so she thinks Asya is a witch when the whole time Asya was the one being kicked out for no reason. So yeah, both of those I'll agree with are good aspects of High School DxD, both Zenobia and the holy swords. The next one is from Aquafinity, and there's multiple. The first one says, I like Issei's personality. He's very honest and pretty hilarious, unlike other harem protagonists. I do like Issei's personality a lot. I like how good of a person Issei is. It's a lot harder for me to care about a character who's just not a good person, or a character that's unredeemable. And Issei's kind of the complete opposite. I think he actually does redeem himself in this story because he goes from that annoying pervert to somebody who's actually lovable. But yeah, Issei is also very funny, and I do like him more than pretty much every other harem protagonist. I've seen a good amount of harem anime, and I just can't remember their protagonist for some reason, so I guess I'll assume that that means Issei was better. But yeah, I agree with that one. The next one basically says that Issei's struggles are a highlight of the series, and of course I agree with this one. I've talked about it before. It makes him more realistic, it makes his story more interesting to follow. And the last one says, I like the fact that it focuses on other characters too, rather than just the girls and Issei. I like how they focused on Kiba and Gasper for season 2, especially Gasper. And of course I agree with this one too. The entire arcs given to characters was such a smart decision, and I think that also is what stops it from being repetitive, since we're focused on a new character at every different arc. I like that you highlighted Gasper because I do think this is one of the most underrated character arcs. Issei going out of his way to help Gasper and take him under his wing and basically teach him how to be a man, teach him how to be a good person, and teach him how to come out of his shell. It created one of the best conversations in the anime. The next one is from Saga the Funniest, and they said that High School DxD is extremely original as far as its world and narrative goes. Most harem animes play out the same, but I've never seen one flow the way it does with a world like High School DxD. And of course, I do agree with this one too. I think High School DxD is surprisingly original. There probably is something similar to it out there, but I haven't seen it. I've already talked about them bringing other mythologies into the world. I've already talked about them being able to focus on other characters instead of just one or two. I've already talked about Issei going through his struggles, through his trauma. Just as a whole, they are able to tackle so much, and they're able to get a lot done with just 4 seasons. It's honestly surprising. It feels different from not just harem animes, but it feels different from all anime in general. So yes, I agree with that one. The next one is from Demi Mansure, and it says that it blends some of my favorite anime genres together, and the genres are battle shonen, ecchi, harem, and comedy. And this is another thing that it does really well, and I think this is also what adds to that originality that I was talking about before. Its ability to blend all of these genres, I think, is what makes it stand out. Because if you think about it, it really has like every single genre in it. Harem, ecchi, fighting, comedy, drama, vampires. I mean, like, they got everything. I think them going to every single genre and taking a piece from everything, they're able to tell a story without the fan service getting too much in the way. They're able to tell a story without the comedy getting too much in the way. This definitely is one of the best things High School DxD does. Strong agree here. The next one is from LOX, and it says the character designs and the lore. And I do think the character designs are pretty good, but I wouldn't say this is one of the best things it does. Honestly, in hindsight, I think the character designs could have been done better. I feel like there are too many human looking characters. I mean, outside of like the blatant monsters like Fenrir and other dragons, I don't think every character needs to be a human or needs to look human. Like, we could have got somebody with green skin at least. But besides from that, the character designs are pretty good, and no character really looks the same as the other. So I do think they are able to do that well. And the lore is done really well. I talked about this big in my Volume 9 review, but the amount of lore we got on Soso's spear was insane. And it made me care about Soso so much more. He actually feels like a threat because of the lore we get from his spear. And that kind of goes for everything in this series. They're able to make us care about things that we probably shouldn't be caring about because of the lore that we're given. The next one is from Ringfail, and it says the lore and world building it has for an ecchi harem, which I think makes it unique. And yeah, I was kind of just talking about this, but the lore and world building basically go hand in hand. They're able to build out a world of so many mythologies and creatures that we already know about, so we have inherent interest in them, but then they give them lore behind them. Like again, Soso's spear pierced Jesus Christ himself. Like how Siegfried is like a scientific experiment, so that's why he looks like Fried. Things like that just make characters so much more interesting. Like these things that they're able to do, they all come together and they create a pretty interesting world. The next one is from Pedro Alves, and they said the sacred gears they develop based on feelings and growth of the users. It's amazing seeing the things they pass being meaningful. It makes you invested in their personal journey, and I definitely agree with this one. I actually like this take a lot. The sacred gear acts on the emotions of the user, and of course we see this most often with Issei. We see him get mad and it causes a big explosion for the character, or we see him be really determined to get that last shot off on Soso and he's able to curve the shot. Like moments like that are able to make the sacred gears more interesting, and like you said, make us care about the characters' journeys. Seeing Saji give up his entire body basically just to get stronger makes me care about Saji, and we see that through his sacred gear. By the time we see him in season 4, he's basically a completely new fighter. Kiba is determined to get stronger, so we see him create a new balance breaker. These characters are able to create new versions of themselves. Like remember in season 1 when Issei's trump card was the dragon shot? We went from that to season 2 it being his transfer, and then season 3 it was his actual balance breaker, and then in season 4 it was the Triana. Like just that evolution of his sacred gear is so interesting, and they're able to do that with a few different characters, mainly Kiba, Issei, and Saji. The next one is from Needham, and they said I like that it has focus on its side characters as well as the main characters. And of course I've already talked about this, I do agree with this one too. A character I didn't talk about yet though was Koneko. That's another character that they're able to give an entire arc basically. Through this arc we're able to see why Koneko is the way she is. Abandoned by her sister, hunted down by other devils, everybody wanted to kill her, so it makes sense why her emotions were so closed off. They're able to build out these side characters and make us care about them. Even a character like Azazel, we see Azazel from the outside, he's exuding confidence, but then we have these little moments where it's clear that on the inside he has a lot of regret. These type of things that they give to our side characters just make them so much more interesting, and it makes us want to learn more about them. So yes, this is definitely one of the best things they do. The next one is from the Monarch of Bad Decision Making, and they said the dialogue and the power systems. I like the power system so much that I created an AU about it. I don't know what that is, but that's pretty cool I guess. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the dialogue because this is also something I noticed when I rewatched it. But there are a lot of really good dialogue moments. I've already talked about Issei and Gasper's conversation at the end of season 2, but another big one was Issei and Akino's conversation in that same season. Through the dialogue, we're able to see how good of a person Issei is. The things he says to these characters, the way that he's able to make them feel comfortable in their own bodies, it really makes Issei more likable. And even when characters are talking to each other, when all of them came in and make Issei feel wanted and accepted, that dialogue was so beautiful. It really creates such an emotional series, and I do think this is like top 4 best things High School DxD does. I was honestly impressed when I rewatched how good the dialogue was. And I also agree with the power systems. We kind of already talked about the chess pieces being a cool source of power, but also just the sacred gears, technique fighter versus power type fighter versus magical fighter. I think that's what the 3 was. But yeah, I like how they measure the different powers in so many different ways. It again makes the fights more interesting. The next one is from Michael Corleone, something like that. But they said the story leans towards those mainstream anime, unlike normal edgy anime, which I definitely agree. The story definitely feels a lot more like a mainstream story. It's not just overpowered main character pulls all the women and beats up everybody. It's more of a emotional story where characters have to learn to fight through their trauma and have to learn to accept themselves. The way their fights play out also feels a lot more like shonen, the way that it's not just instant victory and it's very back and forth and the main character doesn't just win every time. It definitely does feel more mainstream than it does like a harem anime or like an edgy anime. The next one says you initially start watching it because it's an adult anime, but even after keeping that element, it changes your perception after every rewatch. You know the classic saying, it started for the fan service, stayed for the plot. That's a perfect encapsulation of High School DxD. DxD. And then the last one says the dub supremacy. And of course, I'm an avid dub supporter. They can never make me hate the dub. The next one is from V Scorpio, and there's a bunch of them. The first one is music, and yes, the music is really good. The OSTs in High School DxD, phenomenal. I made a whole video about it. That's how good they are. They're able to convey so much emotion and make us care about scenes so much more than you would think. The next one says the different mythologies, which I already talked about. They also said Issei x Irina for volume 18, which I'm not that far into, so I guess I can't speak on this one. They also like some of the ecchi moments, which of course you're watching High School DxD, why wouldn't you? Issei, even though can be overboard, is one of my favorite characters. Same for Kiba, Akino, Volley, Gasper, Ravel, and Zenobia. For the reason I know about DxD, even though she tried to grape Issei in the pool episode, which I guess definitely is a way to look at that episode. But yes, I do agree that Issei, Kiba, Akino, Volley, those characters specifically are some of the highlights of High School DxD. I wouldn't say Gasper is a highlight. I do think he is a good character. I've already talked about Zenobia. But yeah, basically High School DxD has good characters. We all know this. They give their characters stories. They give their characters trauma. They make their characters likable. It isn't one of those stories where the characters are always mad at each other or always mad at Issei. And I think that also adds to their likability. So yes, characters, music, the mixing of mythology, these are all highlights of High School DxD. The next one is from Domaki, and it says the slice of life vibes. And I don't really know what this means. I don't know if I get any slice of life vibes from High School DxD. The only time I could ever think of getting them is when Issei's in school, but it's not really anything I noticed. The next one is from Frappuccino, and it says using fan service to tell a deeper story rather than only for the sake of fan service, and having characters that feel real and interact with each other in other realistic ways. I've already talked about the fan service, not just being there for the sake of being there and actually playing a big part. Obviously, Issei's a pervert, and the fan service is used for Issei's growth as a fighter, so it is important in that aspect. And the real feeling characters, I think, is also a pretty good highlight of High School DxD too. I like the conversations between characters, and I'm talking about their day-to-day conversations, not Issei cheering somebody up, but even just how they talk to each other. You can tell that these characters like each other. You can tell that they're friends. You know, Issei can joke with Azazel about his hair color, and that feels real because of their relationship that they've already built. Rias, Akino, Tsubaki, and Sona can go off and talk about their childhood, and I love those moments where it feels like we're getting a real conversation. So yes, I do think they do a pretty good job at keeping interactions realistic, and even just not having everything so focused around Issei as a character. A lot of shows struggle with that, where side characters don't talk about anything other than the main character, and High School DxD does have this problem at certain points, but there are times where characters actually feel like normal people because they're not just talking about Issei at every moment. The next one is from Rai Umpire or Re-Umpire, and they said, aside from waifus, probably sacred gears in reference to mythology and historical things. All very valid. I've already talked about all of these, but I do want to talk about with sacred gears a little bit more because they're just so cool. Sacred gears are one of the best concepts introduced in the series. It makes all of the fights so interesting because once you see a character that you haven't seen before, you're wondering what their sacred gear could be. What will they pull out this time? Because at this point, you pretty much need a sacred gear to go head to head with Issei. So every interaction between our main characters and the person they're fighting is able to make you wonder and make you interested in seeing that person's ability, that person's sacred gear, and that's because of how well they're able to do the sacred gears. We're able to see how good Siegfried is with his Asura sacred gear, and it makes me want to see more of sacred gears in general. Of course, they have misses like Heracles, but they also have characters that are completely carried just by their sacred gears like Conla. So yeah, sacred gears are definitely one of the best things they've done. And of course, I've talked about mythologies and historical things like 400 times in this video. I think you get the point on that. The next one is from Keywiz, and they said the fact that there are 2 dragon emperors in need of a duel. And I kinda have the opposite opinion. I like the idea that these 2 dragons are supposed to duel, but Issei and Volley like each other too much to want to kill each other. I like that concept, because I think it builds that Issei-Volley rivalry a lot better than it would if it was just them wanting to kill each other. And like I said earlier, I think this rivalry is one of the better built relationships in the series. But the lore behind Drake and Albion is also pretty interesting. Like, we're talking thousands of years of these 2 just going at it. And obviously that's what leads to things like the Juggernaut Drive and all these other instances of people being overwhelmed by the Red Dragon's power because of this need to be stronger than the White Dragon. Like, the whole concept of these two powers and the fate of them having to fight and kill each other being broken by Issei and Volley because they decided to take two different paths. I think that works really well. So I kind of had the opposite opinion of you. The next one, I'm definitely going to butcher this name, is from Syed Shahir Muhammad, and they said the humor. And yes, the humor in High School DxD is good. I already talked about how even without the dub, High School DxD by itself is a good comedy anime. I think my favorite moment that the dub and sub both do well is when Belzard is there trying to give Issei advice, but instead of actually giving him advice, he just sings the Grab and Dragon song to Issei. I think that's one of the funniest moments. I also love Soso's reaction in both the sub and the dub to the zombie pervs forming the magic circle to summon Rias. He just seems so over everything. Like, even without the dub silliness, it's still a funny anime. And of course, that makes the watch a lot more enjoyable. So that's definitely one of the best things it does. The next one is from Indie Enderman, and they said it's easily the fact that even though it's a harem anime, it stands out amongst the others in the genre. True, Issei is the typical harem main character, but he's so much more than that, easily up there near Shido and Rintaro. I'll just put those in as the same take. And yeah, I agree. I've already talked about this, about how it stands out, because it actually does try to focus on a story and on the characters rather than just force feeding us a relationship or force feeding us fan service. Pretty much everything that happens for a reason, and everything gets built up to throughout the series, and nothing really feels random. And I think that's one of the better things it does, and that's what's able to separate it from, again, your typical harem, your typical ecchi anime. They also point out the fights and the fact that the characters aren't shallow and have depth. I think the fights are better than your typical harem anime. I feel like a lot of harem animes rely on aura in their fights. They like to make their character look cool instead of actually giving us a good fight. I think High School DxD kind of tries to balance the two. And I think the fights are decent. Good for the harem genre, not super good for the shonen genre though. And the characters not being shallow, I've already talked about, I think, every character. I don't even know if there's another character I can even bring up. I guess I probably haven't talked about Rias yet. Even a character like Rias has her own problems. She struggles with her confidence. She struggles with the weight and the expectations that's placed on her, and these things get in the way of her evolving, of her taking the next step in her life, of her getting with Issei. So even a character like Rias, who is kind of presented as perfect, isn't actually perfect. And again, that does separate it from your typical harem ecchi anime. The next one is from D20, and they said that High School DxD has a well-written story, even though some characters don't get enough justice, like Akano Zenobia. The fan service is just the extra boost for most watchers, and basically saying you start watching for the fan service, keep watching for the plot. And yeah, I agree with this. I especially agree with your characters that don't get enough justice part. Akano, I think, is the character that deserves a lot more than what she got. Pretty much my entire Akano is almost perfect video is about the fact that Akano, when she's being focused on, is one of the best characters in the series. But when they're not focusing on Akano, they just have her off doing nothing. You could take her out of season 4 and season 1 and nothing changes. She just has no role in the story, and it's such a shame because, again, seasons 2 and 3 Akano are insane, probably the best character. But yeah, it still has a well-written story. Besides for that, people talk about Akano like she's the best character in the series because of how well written that middle part of her story is, and I think that's proof that it does have a well-written story. That story is the reason why people like Akano more than Rias. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. It definitely has a well-written story that is able to keep the viewer interested in it. They bring everybody in with the promise of fan service, but then they provide an actual story, and of course you still get the fan service that you asked for. So yeah, I definitely agree with this one. The next one is from Adrian Jacobs, and it just says the story. There's not much elaboration here, but yeah, the story's pretty good. I literally just talked about it. Banger story, banger characters, banger emotion, banger drama, decent fight, banger world, banger lore, all come together and create a pretty good story. The next one is from Slim Shade Tree, and they said, I like how the show brought together all the mythologies into one world. It was cool seeing Odin and Loki in season 3. And yes, of course, I've talked about this a million times, but specifically about Odin and Loki, I do think that they did those two pretty well. I do think Loki as a character was actually pretty similar to his original version of himself, but I do think they could have done a little bit better with Odin's character. We haven't seen much of him yet, but I definitely think he was the weakest character that came from the Norse mythology. Obviously the strongest would be Roswisa and Fenrir, but yeah, the Norse mythology part of the story was pretty interesting, so I agree with that one. And then they said the balance breakers are pretty cool, Kiba especially, but after after a few seasons, they made the meaning of the balance breaker lose its touch. At first, it was something that you used as a last resort, and by the end, it's the first thing people bust out. And I do agree that the balance breakers are cool. I disagree with Kiba's being cool. I think Kiba's is okay, but I think his new balance breaker is cooler than the sword birth one. I do disagree that the balance breakers lose their touch. I don't think balance breakers were ever really used as a last resort either. I mean, Kiba was using his sword birth throughout the entire series. I mean, we see it in his fight with Freed. He creates that sword to get rid of the light from Freed's sword. Volley instantly pulls out his balance breaker against Issei. Gasper instantly has his balance breaker. The balance breakers were always there, and they were always used immediately. It was just Issei who used his as a last resort because he had to. He couldn't sustain it. He had to use it as his last resort. So that's just character progression for Issei because he slowly was able to just pull out his balance breaker immediately. But everyone else was able to use their balance breaker pretty much as soon as they could. So I guess I'll disagree with that other one. The next one is from Pawsey, and they said surprisingly well-written characters compared to other harem anime, and Issei struggles and has trauma, which again isn't common from other harem anime. Yes, these two things are some of the best things about High School DxD. I think Issei's trauma is actually probably the best story that they have in High School DxD. I think it's the best developed, and I think it's the most apparent once you actually pay attention to it, because it is everywhere in the story, both in the anime and in the light novel. You just have to really pay attention to it. But once you see it, you really start to appreciate the story of Issei's trauma. So yeah, I agree with those, especially the Issei trauma one, because again, it makes his character more relatable. And yes, it does stick out from your typical harem anime. The next one is from Daniel Padarenga. They said, what I like about High School DxD is the edginess and the story and the action. Also, I like season 4's new animation. I only wish the story was compatible from where they left off back in season 3. I think I'll disagree with High School DxD's edginess being a highlight. I actually think High School DxD's better once it's balancing its seriousness with its comedy. I don't think it should focus on one or the other. Even though I do advocate for its story to be better and its story to take itself seriously, I still think it's very essential for it to have that comedy in it, that fan service in it. I don't think it needs to be a fully serious story, because that would take out such a big enjoyability factor from it. But once it does get a little edgy, I guess it is good. Like when Asya dies, the Rainier fight, those moments of edginess are a highlight in the series. So once they're able to balance it with the comedy, I do agree. But I don't think they should just solely focus on the edginess. I already talked about the action. Seasons 4 new animation, I actually didn't really mind it when I was rewatching it. I didn't really even notice it. I think the season 4 animation is pretty good. I've talked about this before, but if they do continue the series, which probably isn't happening, I'm gonna be honest, I think I've given up hope. But if they do continue the series, they should just stick with Studio Passion, something like that, because it wouldn't make sense to flip-flop back and forth. And the season 4 animation is already pretty good in the first place. And then you said, I only wish the story was compatible from where they left off back at season 3, which I disagree, I guess. I think season 3 should have made their story more compatible with everything else going on, which is why I made a whole entire video about it. The next one is from Thorson Frocks, and it says it has good world building, great writing, and a pretty good introduction. And season 2 was actually one of my personal favorite seasons. Of course, we've obviously already tackled world building and great writing, so I'm gonna focus on the introduction in season 2. The introduction of High School DxD is really good. It does a good job at showing us the type of person Issei is before he becomes a devil. He's a complete loser, nobody likes him, and based on his own inner dialogue, it seems like he doesn't really even like himself. He has regrets about the way he lived life. I think that introduction where we see such a big loser get the thing he wanted most in life, a girlfriend, but then of course that girlfriend turns on him and kills him. That concept right there sets up a really interesting story, and it gives us a lot more room to develop Issei's character, and it allows us to see the development more clearly, because Issei is completely different from the very first few minutes of episode 1 into just the last episode of season 1. The development is right in front of you. And season 2 being the best season, I do think season 2 is a really good season. Very solid all around. I think it has the best art style, the best animation, and I love that it focuses on a different character that's not Issei. So season 2 is a very good season. Isn't my favorite. I would have to write it down and rank them. We'll see. The next one is from this name. game, and it says the designs and the Sacred Gears. I talked about the character designs earlier. I think they're cool, but I do think they could be better. Like, I don't really get why every single devil just has to have human skin. Like, you're telling me there isn't a single devil, not a single one with blue skin? Like, there aren't different tribes of devils that all look different? They all just have to look the exact same? Like, I feel like when it comes to those characters, I mean, they all look the same basically. So I do wish there was more variety there, but again, the main cast are easy to tell apart from each other. And then the Sacred Gears, I've talked about the Sacred Gears too. Sacred Gears are cool, they're flashy, they make fights more interesting, they make us more interested in the character's journey. So yeah, overall, Sacred Gears are honestly one of the most underrated aspects of the series. The next one is from Shawnee Day Ryan, and they said, "You are a good high school DxD scaler, and you know how to do your work properly, and I watch your videos." Thank you, Shawnee D. Ryan. I wouldn't call myself a high school DxD scaler, but I do like to put effort into these videos because I do enjoy high school DxD as a series, and I would like other people to enjoy it the same way I do. So yes, thank you. And then the last two are from Furious Maximum and J-Day. Unfortunately, I don't think I can do these because they are actually spoilers for volumes I haven't read yet, so I wouldn't be able to put my input on these. So I did see you, but I'm just not that far into the story, so I just have nothing to say there. So sorry about that. And there goes that video. I'm losing my voice here because I ended up talking way more than I thought I would. This is supposed to be a quick and easy video, but I think it's going to end up being kind of long. I'm going to probably do the opposite version of this next, so I'll ask you guys about the worst things about High School DxD, and I'll make a video about that. I'll also probably make a video about the High School DxD game. I'm going to be playing it soon. So yeah, I guess you can look forward to that. But anyways, this video was longer than I thought it would be, so I'm going to get out of here. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.